There are places on this earth that swallow men whole. Places so ancient, so alive with something you cannot name that your mind simply refuses to process what your eyes are seeing. The Amazon is one of those places. It does not want you there, and if you're unlucky enough to wander too deep, too far from the light, it will make sure you never leave. The three men whose stories you are about to hear went into the jungle for different reasons. They came out changed. One barely came out at all. Their stories were shared in the darkest corners of the internet, passed between explorers and researchers who know that some things cannot be explained, only survived. Stay with me, because once you hear what waits in the green dark, you will never look at the wilderness the same way again.
My name is Daniel. I was a freelance travel journalist. Was. Past tense. I don't do that anymore. In 2019, I joined a small expedition into a remote stretch of the Peruvian Amazon near the JAVARI Valley. It was a legitimate assignment. I was documenting uncontacted tribes from a safe distance, traveling with a local guide named Tomas, a man who had spent 30 years navigating those rivers. He told me on the first night that the jungle had rules. You don't go north after dark, you don't drink from still water, and if you ever see a fire on a hill where no fire should be, you turn the boat around, no questions. I should have listened. On the fourth day, our engine died. We drifted for hours before Tomas managed to get us to shore. We were somewhere none of our maps showed clearly, a blank stretch of green, unmarked, unnamed. Tomas was worried in the way that only a man who deeply respects something can be. Not panic, a quiet, knowing dread. We made camp. The jungle around us was louder than it had been. Insects, birds, the constant drip and rustle of the canopy above. But then, around midnight, everything stopped. Not quieted, stopped. Complete silence. The kind of silence that doesn't exist in the Amazon. It's not natural there. Something had switched off the jungle. Tomas was already awake when I sat up. He had his machete out and he was staring at the tree line. I followed his gaze. There were people standing at the edge of the forest. I couldn't tell how many at first. They were painted, dark paint that made them nearly invisible against the trees, standing so still they could have been statues, just watching us. Tomas whispered to me, and I'll never forget this. He said, "Do not run, do not speak, do not stand up. We breathe and we wait." I don't know how long we sat there. It felt like a year. My heart was hammering so hard, I was sure they could hear it. The figures didn't move, didn't speak, and then one of them stepped forward into the faint moonlight, and I saw his face. He was old, decorated with bone and feather, and something dark around his eyes. He held something in his hands, what looked like a human skull, yellowed and old, tied with woven cord. He looked at us with an expression I had never seen on a human face before. Not anger, not curiosity. It was something like recognition, like he had already been expecting us, like he already knew how our story ended. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone, all of them, back into the darkness. The jungle sound slowly returned. In the morning, we found our camp surrounded by marks in the earth, deep lines arranged in patterns neither of us could understand. Tomas took one look at them and started breaking camp. He told me they were a message, a warning. He wouldn't tell me what it said. We reached the river by noon, and I didn't ask. I spent months trying to research what I had seen. Tribes in the JAVARI Valley are among the most isolated on Earth. Some are known to kill outsiders on sight. Researchers believe several groups practice ritual cannibalism as part of ancestor ceremonies. The skull the old man carried, I try not to think of whose it was. What I cannot explain, what I will never be able to explain, is how he looked at me. There was no surprise in his eyes, none at all. like my arrival had already been written somewhere, in some ancient knowledge I had no access to, like I was just another soul the jungle had sent him. I quit journalism 6 months later. Some stories are not meant to be told, but this one wouldn't let me stay quiet.
My name is Marcus. I'm a survival instructor based in Sao Paulo. At least, that's what I was before my expedition into the Vale do Javari in 2021. I've trained in jungles across South America. I've faced anacondas, flash floods, and septicemia in the field. Nothing, not one single thing in my career prepared me for what happened out there. I was hired by a small documentary crew, 4 of us total. We were documenting illegal gold mining operations encroaching on indigenous territories. It was dangerous work, but calculated danger, the kind I knew how to manage. We had permits, we had emergency transponders, we had protocol. None of it mattered. On the 3rd day, our drone footage picked up something strange. A settlement deep in a section of jungle we had been assured was uninhabited. No cleared fields, no visible boats, just structures, half swallowed by vines, arranged in a pattern that didn't match any indigenous architecture our consultant had ever documented. She said it looked old, very old. The director, a young guy, ambitious, hungry for the kind of footage that wins awards, decided we should investigate. I told him no. I told him we were outside our permitted area. I told him the transponders would have a 12-hour lag in that part of the valley. He overruled me. 2 of the crew agreed with him. That is how 3 professionals with good instincts make a fatal decision. Peer pressure doesn't disappear just because you're in the jungle. We moved toward the settlement on foot. Within an hour, I realized we were being followed. I could feel it before I could hear it, a pressure in the air, a shift in the animal sounds around us. Then I heard it, movement, not random, not fleeing, pacing us, something that matched our speed and direction with deliberate precision. I called a stop. I got everyone into a tight group and told them quietly that we were going to turn around and walk, not run, back the way we came. I want you to understand that in a survival situation, controlled retreat is almost always the correct choice. Predators, human or animal, are triggered by running prey. The director had his camera up. He was still filming. That was when the first arrow hit the tree beside my head. I heard it before I saw it, a sharp crack, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. I grabbed the director by the collar, and we moved. Behind us, I could hear them now, more than I could count, moving through the undergrowth with a fluency that made our crashing, stumbling retreat feel pathetically slow. They herded us. I understand that now, looking back. They did not want to catch us immediately. They let us run, let us exhaust ourselves, let panic hollow out our decision-making until we were nothing but frightened animals burning through our last reserves. When we finally stopped, chest heaving, soaked through, disoriented, there were at least 15 of them standing in a loose circle around us in the trees, armed, watching. The director, I'll give him this, he lowered the camera. What happened next is something I have described only to a psychiatrist and to the Funai officials who debriefed us after our rescue. What I can tell you is that we were held in a structure at the edge of that settlement for 2 nights. I am not able to describe everything I heard during those 2 nights. There was chanting, there was fire, there were sounds from somewhere deeper in the settlement that I choose to interpret as animal, because the alternative does not bear sitting with. On the 3rd morning, a Funai emergency team arrived following our transponder signal. Our captors disappeared into the forest before the helicopter had even touched the ground, as if they had known it was coming, as if the entire 3 days was a performance meant to tell us something. The cameraman had a breakdown and never worked in the field again. The director submitted his footage for an award. He cut the part where he was crying. I still work in survival training, but I tell every single one of my students the same thing now. There are places in this world where you are not the apex predator. The Amazon is one of them, and the most dangerous thing inside it is not a creature without a name. It's a tribe,
with a very long memory.
My name is Rodrigo. I grew up on the banks of the Rio Negro. My father was a fisherman. My grandfather was a fisherman. I have lived my entire life alongside the Amazon, and I have heard its stories since before I could walk. This is not a story I heard. This is something that happened to me when I was 24 years old. I have told this story only to my priest and to my wife, but I am telling it now because I believe certain things need to be said out loud before they eat you alive from the inside. In 2017, I was hired as a river guide for a group of researchers from a European university. 3 academics studying plant-based medicines used by isolated tribes. Good people, intelligent people, people who had studied the Amazon from a safe distance for many years and believed that knowledge was a form of protection. It is not. We were traveling a tributary I had never guided before, but I had been recommended by a colleague who said it was passable in the dry season. The first 2 days were unremarkable, beautiful even, the kind of quiet that feels like the world before people ruined it. The researchers were happy. We made camp each night with the kind of easy confidence that comes just before everything goes wrong. On the 3rd night, one of the researchers, a young woman named Petra, woke me. She was shaking. She said she had seen a man standing in the river, in the middle of the current, waist deep, completely still, staring at our camp. When I got up to look, there was nothing there. I put it down to the jungle playing tricks. It does that. The shapes in the dark, the sounds that shouldn't be there. You learn to rationalize. I built up the fire and went back to sleep. The next morning, we found the camp had been visited. Our supply boxes had been moved, not opened, just moved, rearranged in a pattern around the fire pit, a perfect circle. The researchers thought it was fascinating. I was terrified. I knew what that pattern meant. My grandmother had told me once. It meant we had been counted. We were being watched. We had been for days, probably, and now they were letting us know. I wanted to leave immediately. The lead researcher, a man named Professor Heikkinen, argued that we were close to documenting something no Western scientist had ever recorded. He offered me double my fee. I am ashamed to say I took it. That afternoon, we heard the drums, low, rhythmic, further upriver. The researchers wanted to approach the sound with white flags raised, the internationally recognized signal of peaceful contact. I told them in terms I am not proud of that white flags mean nothing in the JAVARI. They mean nothing to people who have watched outsiders wave flags while reaching for their gold and their land and their children for 500 years. We argued. We moved upriver anyway, too slowly and too noisily, announcing ourselves to everything that lived in that stretch of jungle. The current turned red. Not immediately, not all at once, but a dark discoloration spreading through the water ahead of us. I cut the engine. In the silence, I heard the drums had stopped. And then I saw it. Downstream from us, barely visible in the green shade of overhanging trees, a series of large bundles hanging from branches above the water, wrapped in leaves, suspended over the current. The researchers were reaching for their cameras. I was already pulling the starter cord. I don't know if those bundles were what I believed they were. I try to hold on to that uncertainty, but the smell that reached us across the water before I got the engine going, that smell has never fully left me. We got out. We reached a Funai post by nightfall. I reported everything. The officials looked at me with the particular expression of people who have heard this kind of report before and expect to hear it again. Professor Heikkinen published a paper on uncontacted tribes in the region. It mentioned a brief encounter and a strategic withdrawal. He did not mention the bundles. He did not mention the smell. He sent me a copy. I threw it in the river. I guide tourists on the Rio Negro now. Safe routes, daylight only, back before sunset. People ask me why I won't go deeper, why I won't take them to the remote stretches where the real Amazon begins. I tell them the river told me not to. They think I am being poetic. I am not being poetic. 3 men, 3 separate journeys, 3 encounters with something ancient and deeply, deeply human, and yet so removed from the world we think we know that it might as well be another species entirely. The tribes of the Amazon have survived conquistadors, missionaries, disease, and deforestation. They have outlasted every civilization that tried to consume them. They are not savage. They are not primitive. They are something else entirely. People who chose to remain apart, who have protected their world with a ferocity that the modern world has never fully understood, and perhaps never will. But here is what these 3 stories share. Every man who went in thinking he understood the rules came out knowing he did not. The jungle does not care about your permits, your cameras, your instincts, or your career. It has its own logic, its own memory, and somewhere deep inside that impossible green darkness, something is always watching. Sleep well, if you can.